Hi, this is a little intro to Chapter 1. Looking at the to-do list, there is quite a bit to do. It's not that hard. There's just getting set up and the pre-course assessment and watching some videos. But I want to mention Chapter 1 is a very broad, all-encompassing chapter that speaks to globalization as a general topic. And I would also say that globalization as we know it is not new. It's old, thousands and thousands of years old. There's a progression that we've seen with globalization. Of course, what we've seen more recently is the speeding up of globalization. And this chapter speaks to some of the reasons why globalization has sped up. The first thing that you think of is technology, but let's take a step back and realize that post-World War II globe was a lot different than previous World War II. Of course, nations became more modern, but we also had to rebuild. And in order to do that, we had to break down trade barriers. And that was the real reason to accelerate global trade and global business is trade barriers. And that's what Chapter 1 speaks to, is a lot of different trade barriers. Also, post-World War II, there were a lot of important institutions and organizations set up, which you will read about in that chapter. There's next is a technology role, and it's not just computers, but it's the way that we move product, the way that we produce things. We've gotten very sophisticated technologically, obviously. Another thing this chapter speaks to is that there are clear winners and there are losers created through international trade and international business. Things shift away from one place or one country, from one business to another. So you do create winners and losers, and it's important to take care of the losers. How do you handle the losers? Of course, the winners are already taken care of in global trade, but what about the losers when things change, like jobs when they leave? And then the last question raised in this chapter is about environmental questions. Are we okay to degrade the environment in the name of globalization? Trade is good. Globalization is a positive. It has brought people out of poverty. It has helped raise incomes of nations throughout the world. But there's a price to be paid. And is it fair to expect some people to not play by environmental rules and others to play by the environmental rules? So that's the big question right there. So here it is. You're going to watch the chapter on BRICS and China and do some comments here. And there's the link to post that. And every week, let's mention here the point-counterpoint. No, not every week, but we'll have frequent point-counterpoint arguments. Read the whole thing. Take a side. You know, in these discussions, it's also advisable to do some research. Prep your answers. Don't just blab away. Take a side. Figure out why. Jot down some notes about what you're thinking, and then present your argument. And of course, we're going to be respectful for this. And I have a feeling a lot of people are going to all land on one side of some of these arguments. And maybe I'll just take the devil's advocate, take the negative side, and see how that is. Again, most of the time you're going to post first so that you have original creative ideas on your own rather than listening to what other people say and say, oh, that was a good idea, I'm going to follow up with that. No, you post first to express what your ideas might be on that subject. Again, we're going to go through the learning objectives here through this chapter, and there's lots of general broad level information, and many of which will say, oh, we'll revisit that particular thing. For example, the WTO, we might talk more in detail about that. So the typical Chapter 1, there's lots of broad generalities. And lastly, you've got all the links right here for the quiz and the comments and all that. There's a rubric which explains exactly what you need to do for comments. And here's your thing for point and counterpoint, and a link for the flashcards right there. Okay, thank you. That's Chapter 1. Enjoy.